great peace, Yakoki, Yakoki. So it's like 8 a.m. in the morning and getting ready to do some business related to health and fitness. And I'm going to read the stock market, do some Pilates, do some aerobotics or aerobotics. But I came live today on a pre-recorded because I wanted to talk about a discussion that I enjoy having. I enjoy having this discussion. A brother, like, I don't know if he's from the Caribbeans or if he's from the actual coast of Africa, but according to his accent, it seems to be a mix of the two. So I don't know. Like, you gotta pardon me because I don't know all accents. But they like talking about this culture, or I should say this exonym of Bantu, meaning sun-kissed people, right? Because ban means brought and tu means touch, bought, touch, brought, touch, bought, touch. So that's Bantu. And they have different transliterations for the word. But this is what I noticed about this whole conversation. When I look at English, right, it comes from Gaelic. Sometimes I have to check and see which language was more instrumental in creating the other, like which one came first. But obviously, English is older than Gaelic. I would think it is. But in the Western Hemisphere, in the Eastern Hemisphere, Gaelic would probably be older because they read from right to left in Berber tribes. Now, this is what I noticed about that. This is what I noticed. When you look at Gaelic, right, it basically means Georgia. And when you transliterate English, it means in the Gaelic. English in the Gaelic. English in the Gaelic. And then when you read from right to left in Berber sense, right, which Berbers are nomadic people, not necessarily Arabs, but more nomadic, it means chaotic. It means chaotic when you read it from right to left. So you see Shea Alexander, he just won MVP of the finals. I think he did, right? I didn't watch the game. This means that people who have because he's from Canada, right? Right, that's what they say, right? But his name is Alexander. That's what I noticed. And Alexander's means chief, or it means law. So this is what I'm looking at. This is what I'm looking at. When you see chaotic written that way, and you notice that it's francophone south, which means it's come from the Louisiana region, then you say, well, were the Louisiana people, or the Louisiana Creole, right, were they part French? And obviously that, but You ask, were they Canadian? And was Canada, or the Canadian sense, right? Canaan, Canadian, Canaan, that's Canada. Do you say, was Canaan and Canada a part of Louisiana? Then you find that out, right? And then it's clear, you know. So you see that and you say, well, where does English come from? Then you find out, okay, after you finding that out, right? English comes from Georgia, which is an Arab origin. It's an Arab origin, Georgia. And I know that because A is on the end of the exonym Georgia. Now, we know that, right? So this is what we ask. Is Sheffield going to be the next mayor of Michigan? And she probably is, because, you know, Shea, he just won MVP. And we know how numbers work. So when you have that, right, you clearly understand that, you know, when we're having discussions about what certain words mean, like, give Georgia their credit, you know, give Georgia their credit. The ancient families there, in an entire sense, right, which is why everybody has started to flock to Georgia after 2013, you know, knowing or unknowingly, you know, the people there who engage in hospitality, which is kind of rare in other places, they clearly know English is their language. And like, you have the Nubians there, right? They always taught language. The Nubians, they always taught language. So yeah, I mean, you have to look at it. You have to look at it that way, really, because, you know, when you see that the Southeast is mainly majority of sharecroppers, you know, not calling them African Americans, right? You can see where some of that development comes from as far as language course. They clearly understand the origin of certain languages and use of letters. So it's not out of reach to say Bantu must have came from Biloxi, Mississippi. It's not far-fetched. It's not far-fetched. So how do you look at that? And then do you say that the Jawar come from Cameroon? You see what I mean? We know they say they left Africa over 2,000 years ago. We know that, right? But they don't say that Jawar, right, which is an exonym, that they came from Cameroon. You know, and I also found out that the word Jawara, it's used by Berber tribes in Northwest Africa. I didn't know that. So that's all I want to say in this video. We have to look at how words correlate and how they find importance in the use of language development and also language reference, you know. So, you know, I want to see people stop, you know, arguing about sense, you know, like, if you have an accent or you have, you know, a different allopath, you know, like, than someone who may know the same things that you know, then you all got to come to a common ground. You see what I mean? You all got to come to a common ground. I think Africans have been colonized, from a grammatical sense. I think Americans have been colonized from a mathematical sense. You see what I mean? Um, Americans go by a default calendar. That's not the same for Eastern Bantu people. They go by a different calendar, right? Um, but the thing with the Americans is that they know language, and that's their calling card is rap, hip hop, R&B, blues, pop, rock, Afro beats. That's their calling, right? Africans' calling is, it's completely different, right? It's something that you would sense that, they're dealing with. I want to say like a math skill, They understand the importance of logistics, which is dealing with numbers. They understand that importance. Because if you can run a country, you definitely understand logistics. And when you start to realize that, they run their countries, you start to ask, do Americans run their country, or do subjects run their country? And I think subjects run America up until now, because again, you're starting to see if Winsome Earl becomes governor of Virginia, and you have Garland Gilchrist who becomes governor of Michigan, then we're setting a new path, and I think we already are doing that. But, if that actually happens, then, you can't say America is now somehow falling, you know what I mean? Because now you have Americans who are reinstituting, like I said, they're not only reinstituting language, but, they're also reinstituting math language. So, great piece, Yakoki.